My in-laws convinced my husband to divorce me, so I exposed their family's dark secret and destroyed them all. Let me tell you about the day I destroyed an entire family with one phone call to the FBI. My in-laws thought they were so clever, spending 3 years poisoning my husband against me until he finally asked for a divorce. They whispered lies about me being a gold digger, manipulated every conversation, and systematically turned the man I loved into a stranger who looked at me with disgust. But what the prestigious Henderson family didn't know was that I had discovered their darkest secret, a 20-year money laundering operation that funded their perfect suburban lifestyle. By the time I finished exposing them, my father-in-law was in federal prison, my mother-in-law lost everything, and my ex-husband was begging me to take him back. But it was too late. I had already decided that some betrayals are unforgivable. My name is Rachel, and 3 years ago I married into what everyone considered the perfect American family. The Hendersons lived in a beautiful mansion, drove luxury cars, and were respected pillars of their community. My husband Michael was a successful lawyer. His father Robert owned several legitimate businesses, and his mother Patricia was known for her charity work and social connections. From the outside, they had everything: wealth, status, and the kind of family unity that most people only dream about. But what I discovered during my marriage was that the Henderson family's success was built on lies, manipulation, and criminal activity that had been carefully hidden for decades. More importantly, I learned that they were willing to destroy anyone who threatened their perfect image, including their own son's wife. When Michael and I first started dating, his family seemed to welcome me with open arms. Patricia would invite me to family dinners, Robert would ask about my career goals, and they appeared genuinely interested in getting to know me as a person. I felt lucky to be marrying into such a close-knit, successful family. "Rachel, we're so happy Michael found someone like you," Patricia told me during one of our early meetings. "You're exactly the kind of woman we hoped he would choose: intelligent, ambitious, and clearly devoted to making him happy." But I gradually began to notice that the Henderson family's acceptance of me came with conditions and expectations that became increasingly difficult to meet. They had very specific ideas about how I should behave, what career choices I should make, and how I should prioritize Michael's needs over my own ambitions. "Rachel, don't you think it's time to start thinking about giving Michael children?" Patricia would ask during family gatherings. "Michael has always wanted a large family, and you're not getting any younger." When I explained that Michael and I wanted to wait a few years before having children so I could establish my career, Patricia's attitude toward me began to change in subtle but noticeable ways. "Career women often have trouble balancing family responsibilities," Patricia would comment. "I hope you won't let professional ambitions interfere with being a good wife to Michael." Robert was more direct in his disapproval of my independence. "Michael needs a partner who supports his success, not someone who's competing with him," he told me during a private conversation. "The most successful marriages happen when wives understand their role is to make their husband's life easier, not more complicated." I started to realize that the Henderson family had expected Michael to marry someone who would be completely submissive to their family dynamics and willing to subordinate her own goals to their expectations. My desire for career success and financial independence threatened their control over Michael and their vision of what his life should look like. But the real problem began when I started asking questions about the source of the Henderson family's wealth. Robert claimed to own several small businesses, but their lifestyle suggested income levels that didn't match what those businesses could realistically generate. They owned multiple properties, took expensive vacations, and spent money freely without any apparent concern about budgets or financial planning. "Robert, what exactly do your businesses do?" I asked during one family dinner. Michael mentioned real estate and consulting, but I'd love to understand more about how you built such a successful company. Robert's response was vague and evasive. "It's complicated, Rachel. I've been involved in various ventures over the years: import, export, real estate development, business consulting. The key is diversification and understanding market opportunities." But when I asked more specific questions about his companies, employees, or business operations, Robert would change the subject or give answers that didn't make sense. Michael seemed uncomfortable when I pressed for details, and would often redirect conversations away from family business discussions. "Rachel, why are you so interested in my father's business affairs?" Michael asked me privately after one dinner. It seems like you're interrogating him instead of just enjoying family time. Michael's defensive response made me realize that there were aspects of his family's wealth that he either didn't understand or didn't want to discuss. But my background in finance made it obvious that something about the Henderson family's money didn't add up. That's when I started doing my own research into Robert's business holdings and financial activities. What I discovered was shocking and explained everything about the family's behavior, their wealth, and their desperate need to control who Michael married. Robert Henderson wasn't just a successful businessman. He was the head of a sophisticated money laundering operation that had been running for over 20 years. His import-export businesses were fronts for washing money from various illegal activities, including drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and tax evasion schemes. The Henderson family's entire lifestyle was funded by criminal proceeds that Robert had been systematically cleaning through fake businesses, shell corporations, and fraudulent real estate transactions. Their beautiful home, expensive cars, and luxury vacations were all purchased with dirty money that should have landed Robert in federal prison years ago. But Robert had been smart about covering his tracks. He had created an elaborate network of legitimate-looking businesses that generated just enough legal income to justify their lifestyle to casual observers while hiding the true source of their wealth from law enforcement. The most disturbing discovery was that Patricia and Michael both knew about Robert's criminal activities and had been benefiting from illegal money for years. Patricia used laundered funds for her charity work, creating a public image of generosity, while actually donating stolen money to gain social status. Michael's law school education, his first house, and even his law practice had all been funded with criminal proceeds. This explained why the Henderson family was so concerned about who Michael married, and why they were so threatened by my questions about their finances. They needed a daughter-in-law who would be naive, submissive, and completely uninterested in understanding the source of their wealth. Instead, they got me. Someone with financial expertise who asked uncomfortable questions and had the knowledge to recognize money laundering when I saw it. Once I understood what the Henderson family was really hiding, their behavior toward me made perfect sense. They began systematically undermining my marriage to Michael by poisoning him against me and convincing him that I was a threat to family harmony. Rachel asks too many questions about things that aren't her business, Patricia would tell Michael when she thought I couldn't hear. She seems more interested in our family's private affairs than in being a supportive wife to you. Robert was more direct in his manipulation. Michael, your wife doesn't respect family privacy or loyalty. She's constantly prying into matters that don't concern her. That kind of behavior could cause serious problems for all of us. Over the course of several months, the Henderson family convinced Michael that I was nosy, disrespectful, and potentially dangerous to their family's reputation and financial security. They made him believe that my questions about their business were evidence that I was greedy, untrustworthy, and possibly planning to cause legal problems for his father. Rachel, my family thinks you're trying to create conflict between us, Michael told me during one of many arguments that had been orchestrated by his parents' manipulation. They feel like you don't respect our family's privacy, and that you're always looking for problems that don't exist. Michael's attitude toward me changed dramatically as his family's poisoning took effect. He became suspicious of my motives, critical of my behavior, and increasingly distant from our relationship. The loving, supportive husband I had married was being replaced by someone who saw me as an enemy rather than a partner. Maybe we rushed into this marriage too quickly, Michael said during what would be our last attempt at couples counseling. I'm starting to think we're fundamentally incompatible and want different things out of life. But I knew that Michael's doubts about our marriage weren't his own thoughts. They were the result of months of systematic manipulation by his criminal family, who saw me as a threat to their illegal operations. 6 months after I discovered the truth about the Henderson family's money laundering, Michael asked me for a divorce. He claimed that we had grown apart, and that he realized we weren't right for each other, but I could hear his parents' words and influence in everything he said. Rachel, I think it's best if we end this marriage before we hurt each other anymore, Michael said during the conversation that officially ended our relationship. You'll be happier with someone who shares your values, and I need to focus on my family and my career. The divorce proceedings were swift and uncontested, because I didn't fight Michael's decision or demand a large settlement. The Henderson family probably thought they had successfully removed the threat I posed to their criminal enterprise by convincing their son to divorce me. But what they didn't know was that I had spent months gathering evidence of their money laundering operation and was already in contact with federal investigators who were very interested in the Henderson family's business activities. I had copies of financial documents, bank records, business filings, and other evidence that clearly showed Robert's criminal network and the family's involvement in laundering millions of dollars over 20 years. I also had recordings of conversations where family members discussed their illegal activities and their concerns about my questions threatening their operations. 2 weeks after my divorce from Michael was finalized, I walked into the FBI field office with a comprehensive file documenting the Henderson family's criminal enterprise. Agent Morrison, who specialized in financial crimes, was immediately interested in the evidence I had gathered. "Mrs. Patterson, this is exactly the kind of case we've been building against organized money laundering operations," Agent Morrison told me after reviewing my documentation. "The evidence you've provided gives us everything we need to prosecute Robert Henderson and potentially other family members who were involved in his criminal activities." The FBI investigation moved quickly once they had my evidence and insider knowledge of the Henderson family's operations. Within 3 months, federal agents executed search warrants on Robert's businesses, the family home, and several properties that had been purchased with laundered money. The raids were coordinated and comprehensive, designed to seize assets and gather evidence before the Henderson family could destroy documents or transfer money to hidden accounts. I watched the news coverage from my apartment, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness, as I saw the family that had destroyed my marriage being arrested for the crimes I had exposed. Robert Henderson was charged with money laundering, tax evasion, racketeering, and operating a criminal enterprise. The federal prosecutor announced that Robert faced potential prison sentences totaling over 40 years if convicted on all charges. Patricia was charged as a co-conspirator for her role in using laundered money for charitable activities and helping to maintain the family's legitimate public image, while knowing their wealth came from criminal sources. Most shocking for Michael, he was also charged with several felonies related to his knowledge of his father's criminal activities and his use of laundered money to fund his law practice and personal expenses. The Henderson family's perfect life collapsed overnight. Their assets were frozen, their businesses were shut down, and their reputation in the community was completely destroyed. Local news stations ran stories about the prominent family's criminal empire and the decades of deception that had funded their luxurious lifestyle. 6 months after the arrests, Robert Henderson was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to avoid a longer sentence. Patricia received 10 years for her role in the conspiracy. Michael lost his law license, was sentenced to 5 years probation, and was ordered to pay substantial fines and restitution. But the most satisfying moment came when Michael called me 3 weeks after his father's sentencing, begging me to meet with him so he could apologize for how his family had treated me and ask if there was any chance we could reconcile. "Rachel, I know now that my parents manipulated me into divorcing you," Michael said during our phone conversation. "They were afraid that you would discover their criminal activities, so they convinced me that you were the problem in our marriage. I'm so sorry for believing their lies and destroying our relationship." Michael went on to explain that he had finally understood how his family had systematically poisoned him against me, and that he realized I had been the only person in his life who had genuinely cared about his well-being, rather than using him for criminal purposes. "I love you, Rachel, and I want to try to rebuild our marriage if you'll give me another chance," Michael pleaded. "Now that my parents can't interfere, we could have the relationship we were supposed to have before they destroyed everything." I listened to Michael's apology and his desperate attempt to reconcile, but I felt nothing except pity for the man who had chosen his criminal family over his innocent wife. "Michael, you made your choice when you believed your parents' lies about me instead of trusting the woman you married," I told him calmly. "You threw away our marriage to protect people who were using you and committing crimes that hurt innocent victims. I can never trust you again." Michael begged and pleaded for another chance, promising that he had learned his lesson and would never let anyone come between us again. But it was too late. The damage he and his family had done to our relationship was irreversible. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had shown me that his loyalty to his criminal family was more important than his commitment to our marriage. I deserved better than a husband who could be manipulated into abandoning his wife to protect people who were breaking the law. Today, 3 years after exposing the Henderson family's criminal empire, I am happily remarried to a man who values honesty, integrity, and genuine partnership. Robert Henderson is still in federal prison and will likely die there. Patricia lost everything and lives in a small apartment, working at a retail job to pay for basic expenses. Michael tried to rebuild his legal career in another state, but has struggled with the criminal record and professional consequences of his family's crimes. He sends me occasional messages asking for forgiveness and second chances, but I never respond. The prestigious Henderson family that destroyed my first marriage learned that some secrets are too dangerous to keep, and that some people are too smart to be intimidated by wealthy criminals. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth destroy people who built their lives on lies and illegal activities. The Henderson family thought they could manipulate and control everyone around them, but they underestimated the power of one person who refused to be silenced. They lost everything: their freedom, their wealth, their reputation, and their family unity, because they chose criminal behavior over honest living and manipulation over genuine relationships. I may have lost my first marriage, but I gained something more valuable: the knowledge that I have the strength and intelligence to stand up to powerful people who try to destroy others to protect their own crimes.